Story 1. The Craigslist Deal. I was looking for a car for my 18-year-old son, and, as is usually the case, all the usual sites, like Cars.com and eBay Motors, were grossly overpriced. The only place to find anything worthwhile turned out to be Craigslist. After about a week of searching, I stumbled upon an ad for a 2003 Toyota Camry. The mileage was only 67,000 miles, no accidents or damage, in good condition, all for $3,500. For such a reliable car with such low mileage, this was an incredible stroke of luck. The seller, who introduced himself as Bob, lived only 10 miles from me. I called him to arrange a meeting. He sounded perfectly normal, assuring me there were absolutely no problems with the car. I brought all $3,500 in cash with me, although I planned to negotiate. I arrived on the dirt road leading to Bob's house about 15 minutes early. It was a small house with a fairly large lot, as it was far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open. I peeked in, but there was no one there except for a strange amount of car parts. The car I was looking for wasn't there either, just an old pickup truck. I checked the address on the front door. It was correct. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked. After exactly 5 minutes of knocking, deciding that was enough, I dialed Bob's number. Hearing his phone ring from inside the house, I was extremely confused. Now I knew I was at the right address, but I couldn't understand why he wasn't answering if he was home. I decided to look through one of the windows. It was quite dark inside, and I didn't see much. I made out an old-fashioned dining set, and across from it, someone was standing by the back door of the house, looking out. Deciding this must be Bob, I tapped on the window, but he didn't move. Since this wasn't a rural area, the backyard was open, without any fences. I simply walked around the house. As I approached the back door, it dawned on me how he could have failed to hear me. The figure standing by the door turned out to be a taxidermied human mannequin. I bolted back to my car. Before driving off, I took one last look at the house. The blinds on the window I had looked through were now drawn, but I saw that 2 slats were slightly open. Someone was at the window, watching me. I don't think I need to say that I sped home. The whole situation still makes no sense. The car parts, the absence of the Toyota Camry, and the mannequin. The absence of the car suggests that this person had no intention of selling me anything, and this, in turn, gives rise to a chilling thought. I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue looking out of his back door. Story 2. Mom in the Closet. This happened when I was very young and often alone with my mother, who raised me by herself. She always visited me at night when she got up to use the restroom. On this particular night, I woke up, thinking I heard something in the closet. I lifted my head and saw my mom at the foot of the bed, playfully waving at me. She told me to go back to sleep. Then she walked over to the closet, cracked the door open, leaving only a small gap, and stood there, with her head poking out of that gap. I distinctly remember her eye peering out of that slit and watching me. Like any small child in that situation, I lay down and fell asleep moments later. The next morning, while I was eating cereal, I asked my mom why she was hiding in my closet last night. She stopped and looked at me, puzzled and anxious. She said she hadn't been in my room all night. At first she thought someone had broken into the house, but soon realized it must have been a dream or a hallucination. I've only had 2 other hallucinations since then, but neither was as vivid or as creepy as that one. Story 3. The Ranch Thunderstorm. In 2009, I was spending the weekend at my uncle's ranch while my parents were renovating our new house. It was my second night there, a Saturday, and one of the year's worst thunderstorms was raging outside. I'd say there were at least 3 thunder and lightning strikes per minute, and we were right in the middle of it because the thunder immediately followed the lightning. I've always enjoyed listening to thunderstorms while lying in bed, so I stayed up late watching TV and enjoying the atmosphere. After the movie ended, I turned off the TV and tried to fall asleep. When I heard the next lightning strike, I heard a metallic clanging sound coming from outside simultaneously with it. I didn't think much of it. 20 seconds later, I again heard a distinct metallic clanging, timed with the flash of lightning. I don't want this to sound like a horror movie cliché, but my uncle is a pretty creepy person, and we've never been close, so I was uncomfortable waking him up. I just tried to forget about it. But the clanging repeated, and I started to worry. What the hell could it be? After the third time, I finally got out of bed and went to the guest bedroom window. The water pouring down the glass made it difficult to see anything in the dark fields. A flash of lightning momentarily lit up the area, but I didn't see anything, yet I heard the sound of metal striking again. The sound was so close now that it seemed to be coming from the left of the window, in a blind spot. I decided to do something I knew my uncle wouldn't like. It was a bit risky, but I was going to open the window and look out to see what was making the sound. I unlatched the lock and pushed the sash up. The wind immediately sucked raindrops into the room and onto me. I stuck my head out and looked left. At that very moment, lightning illuminated the area again, and I saw a person dressed all in black, crouched by the exterior basement door, with their arm raised. Before the sky went dark again, I caught a glimpse of the source of the sound. The person was pounding on the lock of the basement door. I pulled my head back in and quietly closed the window, making sure I locked it. I was in a panic. I was afraid he might have seen or heard me. I got back into bed and pretended to be asleep, turning away from the window. Lightning struck again, but this time there was no metallic clanging. My heart sank with this realization. I lay in bed for a long time, hoping that whoever was out there would leave. After 3 more flashes of lightning without the clanging accompanying them, I decided it was safe to go to my uncle. I turned to face the window and screamed. A clear figure was standing right at the window, looking at me. I screamed as loud as I could and ran straight to my uncle's room. He rushed outside with a shotgun, wearing nothing but his pajama bottoms, not even socks. He ran all over the property, yelling like a maniac, but found no one. The next morning, we got a better look at the marks on the basement door lock. According to my uncle, it was nearly broken. Only 3 or 4 good hits were left. He was proud of me for noticing. Luckily, I left that same day. My uncle hasn't reported any incidents to us since then, so I guess he's okay. I'm grateful I stayed up late that night watching the movie, because I might have prevented a robbery, or maybe something much worse. Story 4. The Movie Theater and the Severed Head. I don't care what anyone thinks, but I love going to movie theaters alone. I have an irregular schedule, and I often don't work on weeknights. So, on one dreary Wednesday evening in 2017, when few people were thinking about going to the movies, I went. I've always liked avoiding the crowds. That's my thing. I went to see some little-known film that was unlikely to be on anyone's must-watch list. I was the only person in the theater, as I expected. I sat right in the center, in one of the upper rows, and put my feet up on the seat in front of me. About 20 minutes into the movie, I noticed someone a few rows below. I hadn't noticed them come in. The theater was dark because the scene in the film was set in a dark location. However, this person wasn't sitting properly. All I could see was the top of their head sticking out over one of the seats, looking in a direction that was clearly not the screen. It was too dark to tell if they were looking directly at me, but when the scene changed to a brighter background, the theater became lighter, light enough to see that they were practically looking at me. Their face was pale and lifeless, their hair matted and coarse. I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. I'm an introvert, or just an awkward person, so I didn't want to ask if everything was okay. I perceived it as a confrontation. The screen darkened again, and at the same time, the person dropped down behind the seat, completely out of sight. I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. I felt very uncomfortable, even scared. But I didn't get up. I stayed seated. Many scenes passed. I almost forgot about what happened. Almost. Just as I got back into the movie, the person's head reappeared from behind the seat, this time much closer, only 3 rows away from me. I involuntarily let out a loud yelp because it made me jump. Now I could see his face better. It truly looked lifeless, with eyes fixedly open. Still, I couldn't tell if he was looking directly at me. I could now see more clearly that it was a man with long, unkempt hair. I dashed from my seat toward the exit. To leave, I had to walk past the row where this person was. As I walked past, I glanced into that row. I expected to see the rest of his body slumped behind the seats, but instead I saw something you'd see in a nightmare. Some guy was lying on the floor holding a severed head mounted on a stick. I didn't stop to check if it was a sick joke or a real head. I ran out the back exit to the parking lot. I drove home in a panic, my heart pounding. That head looked too real. When I got home, I searched for information on recent murders or missing persons in the area. Scrolling through the list of missing people, I came across a photo of a 17-year-old boy named Donald Watkins, who had been missing for a month. Judging by the picture, his face could match the head I saw in the movie theater. Of course, it could have been my brain trying to connect any similarities, but the hair, the nose, the eyes, they really might have matched. The next day, I simply called the movie theater, told them my story, and suggested they check the cameras. I left my number, but no one ever called me back. I decided not to waste any more time on it. Story 5. Neighboring the Unknown. A long time ago, I briefly lived with my good friend Ben on a quiet street in Northville, Michigan, near Detroit. It wasn't the best house, neighborhood, or area, but for 2 young guys who were broke, the price was perfect. Ben and I had been friends since we were 9, worked the same job, and living together seemed like a great idea. On the very first day, we quickly realized that the spooky house across the street with overgrown grass and bushes was abandoned, like many homes around. For some reason, we hadn't noticed it before. There was even graffiti on one of the windows and the fence. The neighbors on one side seemed creepy, and we didn't want to approach them. The neighbor on the other side was an elderly man, Marv, a very interesting hippie guy with long gray hair and an equally long gray beard. He seemed friendly at first, but was also very strange and difficult to talk to. We spoke to him on our second day after work. He said the house across the street had been abandoned for as long as he could remember. That night, as the sun was nearly set, we were sitting on the porch, smoking. I looked at the house across the street and felt a pang of shock in my stomach. I jumped up, threw my cigarette down, and crushed it. Ben looked at me in confusion, and I pointed to the window across the road. I was pointing at a face looking out at me from a solitary upstairs window on the 2nd floor. "Do you see? Someone's in the window!" Ben looked immediately, but I saw the person pull their head back before he could notice. "It was weird," I explained to Ben. "I couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman, old or young. The glass was too dirty. I just know I saw eyes, and they were looking at us." Ben said I was creeping him out, but he believed me. We ran over to Marv's house to tell him, but strangely, he didn't answer our knock, even though we could see him watching TV in his tiny, cluttered living room. The fact that the guy wouldn't open the door scared us even more. "Dude, what the hell is up with this place?" Ben laughed, but the situation wasn't funny anymore. Ben had a katana. He'd brought it to Michigan and suggested we take it across the street, break into the house from the backyard, and see what was going on. We were always adventurous, bold troublemakers, so this was our natural reaction. When it got dark, we walked across the street to the backyard, broke the board holding the back door, and entered the house. We had powerful flashlights to illuminate every room. The house was dusty and dilapidated, but surprisingly, it looked untouched from the inside. No graffiti or signs of vandalism. Still, the place was unsettlingly creepy, and we immediately joked that we should bail, but we continued. The first floor was tiny, just like ours. A kitchen, small living room and dining room. There was no basement, just a closet. No one on the first floor. We decided to check the 2nd floor. We creeped toward the stairs, and then Ben suddenly yelled, "Hey, is anyone there?" "Why did you do that?" I whispered. Then we both froze in terror as fast footsteps thudded from upstairs. Someone heavy was running toward the stairs. I literally felt my heart stop. Ben, the one with the katana, was the first to run, grabbing my arm and pulling me with him. We exited the same way we came in and ran back to our house where Marv was simply standing at his window watching us. We didn't know what to do. He just stared intently at us while we paused to catch our breath in front of our house. We went inside, decided not to call the police, and moved out literally the next day. We explained to the landlord that the location was simply inconvenient for us and we needed to leave as soon as possible. We left that house and never looked back. Story 6. The Scream from the Woods. For our son's 12th birthday, my wife and I held a small party in the backyard. As usual, we invited the entire family and let him invite all his friends. We live in rural New Jersey, so our backyard borders the woods on two sides. We have a fairly large lot, which allowed us to set up many tables with food and drinks on the grass. The party extended into the evening. Most of the guests had left, but close relatives and a few friends stayed late. It was probably around 8 o'clock, and the mosquitoes were getting active, so I decided to go to the shed at the far end of the yard, near the woods, to fetch the tiki torches. I grabbed about 6 and laid them on the grass, then went to look for the fuel. While in the shed, I heard footsteps in the woods. I stopped what I was doing and looked, but honestly, it was too dark in the woods to see anything. Finding the fuel, I returned to the others and hammered the torches into the ground. The 6 torches provided enough light and protected us from the blood-sucking pests. There were about 6 kids left, including my son, and they all wanted to play hide-and-seek in the woods. My wife and I allowed it, telling them to stay close to the tree line. My son and his friends went to play, and the rest of us sat in silence for a bit. For 15 minutes we talked with relatives, hearing the children laughing and shouting in the woods nearby. But suddenly, the laughter and shouting turned into screams that sounded alarming. We all looked at each other with worry. The children rushed out of the woods one by one, screaming that something was out there. We don't have bears or other large predators, so that wasn't our first assumption. I told all the children to stay near the patio. My brother Dom and I, being the biggest men, decided to go and check. We took a couple of flashlights and headed into the pitch darkness of the woods. The only sounds around were the crickets and other nocturnal insects. We went deeper, and then we started hearing something else. At first, it sounded like an animal, but as we got closer, the sound became more human-like. We fell silent, and we both agreed we had the feeling that we were being watched, stalked. I stretched out my hand to stop Dom. In the silence, the sound we were hearing could be described as a moaning, angry noise. It resembled a human sound, but it was strange. Then there were several crunches of leaves on the ground ahead of us. We aimed our flashlights there. Someone or something was behind a tree. The moaning sound stopped. Dom stepped forward and called out, "Hey!" What happened next was a classic horror movie moment. The air was filled with a scream so loud, blood-curdling, and non-human that I'm sure it could be heard for miles. Dominic spun around and ran back to the yard. When we got back, we waved everyone into the house. Dom called the sheriff's department. They said it was probably a wild animal. We wanted to insist it was a person, but honestly, we couldn't. To this day, I don't know who or what we saw and heard in those woods, but it definitely haunted us and the kids when they were playing hide-and-seek. And that scream, it just didn't sound human to us.